If one wishes to attain all the elevated and pure qualities by training the mind, one will certainly fail in one's attempts, no matter how long one may try. But if one takes to practice of self-attention, which will destroy the mind, and if one thereby transcends the three ordinary qualities, purity, activity, and inertia, the true quality of abiding steadfastly as the reality will automatically shine forth and flourish in one. If ordinary people practice for many eons without wasting even a moment, they may develop a few of the good qualities which are gracefully brimming over and pouring forth from one who has attained the treasure of self-knowledge and who has thereby transcended the qualities. Yet if any trivial tests come their way, they will fail to remain established in those qualities. Good qualities and bad qualities are not qualities given by God, but are only qualities born of mind. The empty space of self-knowledge that is completely devoid of all good and bad tendencies is alone what is called Sat-Guna. Those fortunate people who have attained a perfect Guru will not toil in vain to cultivate good qualities in the mind. They will only cultivate the practice of self-inquiry, which will draw the mind within and destroy it, and thereby they will not allow the mind to rise in the form of thoughts. To attain the unequaled and unsurpassed nature, there is no way other than the practice of making the mind humbly subside through devotion and inquiry. In the life, if a sage who has transcended the qualities, the actions of his body, will sometimes make it appear as if he is lacking good qualities. However, such actions appear to be real only because of the imagination in the mind of the ignorant who sees them, and hence they are merely a deceptive reflection of his own impure mind. Those who have bad qualities in them will see only bad qualities even in the sage. If one could see one's own defect as clearly as one sees the defect of the others who are in front of the one, then would any evil befall one? Or association with the reality alone is a true Sat-Sanga. Since self alone is a reality, abiding in the self alone is the best Sat-Sanga. Moreover, since those great aspirants who have realized self, the reality cannot be another other than self. They too are the reality itself. Therefore, approach such self-realized ones and remain with them as their devoted slave. If you do not have the power to abide in self, the reality, remain with love in the constant company of sadhus who have known the reality. If you do not have even the good fortune to be in their company, have contact at least with the teachings of such sadhus by constantly studying those books that contain the words they have spoken. Studying such books is also Sat-Sanga. What are those books, the study of which is to be considered as Sat-Sanga? They are only those books that will clearly impress upon you. Self alone is the reality, so always abide in the self. In order to abide in self, practice only self-enquiry and do not follow any other path. Practice self-enquiry now itself. Turn and dive within. If in the name of conscious association you gather together all kinds of people, said holy gathering will consist only of the crowd of people who are skilled in oratory, or who have studied innumerable books, or who have mastered the 64 mundane arts. all of which are unreal products of the mind's power of imagination. Reject all such gatherings, knowing that they are not the true conscious company. Rather than associating with such people, thinking their company to be satsang, it is better for you to remain alone without associating with anyone, because such solitude or non-association will help you at least gradually to gain more and more detachment. For those who have been blessed with the rare and great good fortune of gaining true Sat-Sanga, all the heaps of gold in the seven worlds cannot be compared with that treasure called Satsang, because by such Satsang they will cross the ocean of ignorance, which is so difficult to cross, and thus they will attain in this very life the unequaled state of liberation, which is so difficult to attain. Though your mind lacks the strength of discrimination or dispassion, required to withdraw itself from the false attraction of the pleasures of this unreal world, your mind will naturally and spontaneously become mature to the extent to which you humbly and lovingly come very close and associate with enlightened sages who abide as the reality. If you ask how, just as even as fresh plantain tree will become dry and catch fire when it comes in close proximity to a forest fire, so the minds of those who associate with the jnanis will, unknown to themselves, be made by that association to attain great love, to attend to and abide in self. When we gain association with a person who knows and abides as the reality, we will be able to know very clearly that real devotion to God and steadfast discrimination between the eternal and temporal are steadily rising up and increasingly in our hearts automatically and without our own effort. We should not believe that we have by our own effort and practice brought about the rising of such pure devotion and clear discrimination that we are thus able to experience in our hearts. This true devotion and discrimination are spontaneously and naturally kindled in our hearts not by our own efforts but only by the power of the grace of that Sat Purusha who is living close to us and who appears as if he is someone other than us. Just like a mother who feeds her sleeping child even without the child knowing that he is being fed, the grace of the Sat Purusha enters our hearts in a manner that cannot be known by us even if we have the most subtle and powerful of intellects, and thereby his grace reforms us and brings about the destruction of our mind. His grace is beyond all limits and cannot be gauged by anyone. Having understood the greatness of Satsang, which is revealed by the true words uttered by our Sadguru Sri Ramana, who is the Lord of the universe, when the excellent cool southern breeze itself is blowing, say what is the use of holding a hand fan? Let us live taking refuge in Arunachala, the hill of Satsang. Only those who hold firmly in the reality are sages. Those pure sages are not other than self, whose nature is reality, consciousness, bliss. If, due to its wavering nature, one's mind is confounded and believed, being unable to cling fast to the practice of self-abidance, or to the path of devotion, or to the eightfold path of Raja Yoga, and if one is therefore seeking some good form of austerity spiritual practice as an effective and easy path along which he can take further effort, let him repeatedly come around this divine hill Arunachala. Any kind of action is a dual activity that casts one further and further away from the self, the center of all. But unlike all other actions, doing pradakshina around Arunachala is a dual activity that does not cast one away from self. Therefore, do this. If a cow that is tied by a long tether to a peg fixed in the ground grazes round and round that peg, it does not notice that the length of its tether is thereby decreasing as it becomes more and more twisted around the peg. Similarly, consider how can your mind notice that its outward going tendencies are gradually decreasing or subsiding due to your coming around Arunachala? When the cow goes around the peg more and more, the length of its tether will finally be reduced to nothing, whereupon the cow will be brought to the standstill, being unable to move away from the peg. Similarly, the mind of a devotee who with love does pradakshina around Arunachala, which is self, the exalted space of true knowledge, will finally brought to the standstill with its attention fixed motionlessly within upon self. All its mental tendencies have subsided completely. The fact that the mind of a devotee who does pradakshina around Arunachala will attain a great love to abide attending to self within is a great truth clearly known by direct experience. Arunachala is the blazing fire of jnana which burns to ashes all the desire that give rise to future births. When iron is rubbed against a magnet, the magnet turns the atom of that iron, which were scattered and facing in many directions, and sets them all on a north-south alignment. By thus realigning the atoms in any orderly manner, the magnet transforms the iron into a magnet like itself. Similarly, Arunachala, the magnet, which is the space of the Supreme Self-Consciousness, turns the mind of a devotee who does pradakshina around it to face selfwards and thereby transforms it into self. The story of how King Vajranganda Pandyan finally attained liberation, having lost all the dampness in the form of his desires and attachments, and having gained perfect purity of mind, even though in the beginning he started to do pradakshina of Arunachala in order to fulfill a selfish desire, can be cited as testimony for what has been said above. The benefit in repeating a holy name of God is not only the gain to one-pointedness of mind, but is to surrender oneself to God to such an extent that one's heart melts and dissolves with ever-brimming love for Him while repeating His name. Thinking once of the name of God with a steady one-pointed mind is more valuable than doing 1,000 of repetitions with a wandering mind. But calling intently upon God even once with a mind surging with love for Him is far superior even to doing 1,000,000 of Japa with one pointed mind. While doing repetition of the name of the God, there is one thing called love, which is to be mingled with it. If one knows correctly the way to do Japa, uniting love with the name of the God, the result attained by that Japa will not only one-pointedness of mind, the Japa will bestow upon one the deathless state of the union with God. Uniting love with the name of the God is giving of oneself, the ego I, as an offering to His feet. Love is we and the name is He. Thus, uniting love with His name is offering or self to Him, which is the principle of self-surrender, by which self-surrender the state of self-abidance is attained. Japa can be classified as being of two kinds, namely knowledge and devotion. Repeating mentally I is a knowledge. Repeating the name of the God with love is a devotion or bhakti japa. The mind of one who has liking for Jnana Japa seeks to know the true import of the word I and merges in that. One who is earnest in doing Bhakti Japa loses his separate individuality, melting with love in the name of his Lord. The mind which seeks the true import of the word I while doing natural Japa will lose itself and die in self, the reality. Those who depend upon God, the embodiment of pure consciousness, and who melt with love while repeating His name, become the supreme bliss which is devoid of the ego I, and thus they cease to exist as an entity separate for Him. Our Sadguru, Lord Ramana, who is the real self, has given us only two paths to follow, namely self-enquiry and self-surrender. Knowing that Japa is also thus of two kinds, adhere to whichever one suits you and thereby attain self-abidance. To the extent to which love for God rises in one's heart, to that extent will one acquire knowledge about Him. And to the extent to which one knows the nature of the God, to that extent will the mind gain steadfast love for Him. Thus, knowledge will be increased by devotion, and devotion will be increased by knowledge. By means of our love for God, He will give us more knowledge of Him, and by means of our knowledge of Him, He will give us more love for Him. Therefore, of these two paths, Bhakti and Jnana, follow that one for which you first gain a liking, because that one path will lead you to follow the other one into the heart. In the life of an aspirant who is seeking liberation, Bhakti and Jnana will be experienced as inseparable, like the two sides of one sheet of paper. Hence, each one is equal to the other. They are not two different things, for the true nature of both of them is one and the same. Know that Bhakti and Jnana are merely two names of that one thing. The state of abiding firmly in self alone is wisdom. Would it be possible to abide thus in self if one did not have a love for self? Love for self alone is Bhakti. Abiding firmly in self on account of that love alone is Jnana. What difference is there between these two? Discriminate and know this truth. If there did not exist the power of gravity, which attracts and pulls everything towards the earth, would anything remain stable on earth? On scrutiny, devotion is found to be similar to the gravitational power of attraction, while the state of wisdom is found to be similar to the state of objects remaining stable on earth as a result of that attraction. If either one of these two, the power of attraction or bhakti and the state of abidance or jnana, were absent, the other one does not exist. An aspirant who practices self-enquiry, which is the path of jnana, denies his own individuality by knowing, I, this insignificant ego, am not the doer of any action, while a devotee denies his own individuality by knowing, God alone is the doer of all actions. Thus, an sincere aspirant who follows either of these two paths refrains from assuming the sense of doership. Understand that these two paths are not different even during the time of practice and follow either of them. We should not allow our minds to become bewildered and confused by trying to deliberate and decide which of these two, the practice of bhakti or practice of jnana, is the best means for attaining liberation. For whichever path a liking arises in the heart of a person, for that person that path alone is the best. According to the strength of habit continuing from former lives, in this life the mind will acquire a liking either for the path of devotion or the direct and unfailing path of self-enquiry, and will feel that particular path to be the best, and most suited to itself. Therefore, follow at least one of these two paths to its very end. When, having wept and wept with intense yearning for a long time, unceasingly thinking of and adoring the gracious feet, the mind which arises dissolves and becomes pure. The blemishless self-inquiry will become firmly settled, and the experience of self will of its own accord arise very easily indeed. Oh, you say, we have never seen you closing your eyes and practicing self-abidance. Tell us, how did you attain the state of inner silence? Understanding the above verse, know the secret of God, who is not seen even though one waits closing one's eyes. Since the ego itself is everything, giving up the ego, the feeling I am this body, by surrendering it to God is lovingly surrendering everything to Him. Having once surrendered the ego to God, abiding in self without taking it back again is true tapas. Having surrendered the ego to God, if one takes it back again, that is the sin of stealing back what has once been given. Therefore, in order to avoid committing such a sin, practice self-attention unfailingly, because only if one attends to the ego vigilantly and unceasingly will it drown in the heart so as never to rise again. Destroying the ego through self-attention is alone the excellent path of self-surrender. Therefore, scrutinizing and knowing one's own self is alone the proper method of practicing both self-surrender, the path of devotion, and self-inquiry, the path of knowledge. The path of knowledge in which we scrutinize who am I is itself the path of devotion in which we have true love for God. Knowing thus that self-inquiry and self-surrender are one and the same, not only in their goal but also in their method of practice, follow the practice of self-attention. If we did not have the good fortune of having attained a human body which enable us to experience daily the three states of waking, dream and sleep, how could we have the fitness to do the self-inquiry? Therefore, this human birth is indeed superior to all other births. Except in this human body, all these three states are not experienced in one lifetime by any soul, whatever deva, animal or plant. Therefore, a very great boon indeed is the boon God has bestowed upon us in the form of this human birth, which is such a good opportunity enabling us to inquire and know the self. The three states of waking, dream and dreamless deep sleep are experienced daily by all human beings, are they not? If we keenly scrutinize the nature of these three states, knowledge of the state of liberation, which is the reality of these three states, will be attained by us as a direct experience. In the waking state, we exist as I am. But in this state, besides us, so many second and third person objects of various kinds are also known by the mind. How have all these come from here?